Okay, earlier we made macros that used dim statements. For example, if I look at this add dates macro, we use the dim statement here, which declares a variable. Dim is short for dimensions, and it's used to declare variables. The variable it declares here is called my date, and you can give the variable any name, and I tend to use my and then whatever I want to call it. My date, and earlier on we used my file. But when you use a dim statement, you declare a variable name and you declare the type of data that that variable will contain. So I'm declaring or introducing to Excel a variable called my date as a date. So I expect that that variable will contain a date, as opposed to the earlier example where my file was a string, which is text. So when you declare a variable, you put dim, whatever you want to call it, and then as, and whatever it contains. It can contain a byte, which is a number between 0 and 255 with no decimal places. It could contain a currency, so I could have dim my salary as currency, which means that my salary is expected to contain a monetary value. You can declare something as a date, you can declare something as a string. If you don't declare a variable, it will default to a variant, which is very inefficient and can cause problems in your code. So we're going to look at the dim statements or the declaring of variables in more detail, and we're also going to look at the input boxes in more detail, which we used here also in the add dates example, where we ask the user to enter a date. So I want to look at input boxes and so on. So let's close this file here called import. So I'm just going to go File, Close, and I will save. And I want to open up a new file, so I'm just going to go File, New, and I'll just click the Create button to create a blank workbook. So I've got a brand new workbook. In the Visual Basic Editor, I can see I don't have a code window, and that is because I don't have a module because I haven't recorded any macros. So what I might do first of all is save this particular file here, and I'll save it as chapter 3. So File, Save As, chapter 3, and I'll make it a macro enabled workbook and save. Now I want to insert a module. So in my Visual Basic Editor, I'll go to the insert command in the menu and choose module, and so I've inserted a module. If I then bring up a document that I've given you, which is a code file in Word, I then want to copy and paste a particular subprocedure into this module. So I'm going to go to that code file, and I'm looking for a subprocedure called variables, which I can see here, and if I control click, I can follow that link, and here it is here. To save a lot of typing, you can type this if you want to. I'm just going to copy and paste this into my module. Copy, go to my Visual Basic Editor and paste. And I'll bring up Excel as well. Now I'm just going to bring up the Project Explorer as well, because this module needs to be given a name. So if I go to the View command in the menu and choose Project Explorer, I can see it's module 1. If I go back to View and bring up the Properties window and just resize it a bit, I can give this particular module a name. And just following your notes, I want to copy this into a module called Mod Variables. Mod Variables. Again, I wouldn't encourage spaces, and again I use the word mod or the prefix mod so that I don't accidentally call my module the same name as a procedure. Now the one thing I've noticed also is I haven't brought through the sub, so I'm just going to add sub variables. I should have copied and pasted that, but it's just as easy to type it in. So I've got this sub procedure called variables, and I've got this module called mod variables that I've just copied and pasted from the code file. Now the idea here is I'm declaring two variables. I'm declaring my first name as a string, so my first name will contain text, and I'm declaring my age as a byte, so my age will be a number between 0 and 255 with no decimal places. Having declared those two variables, I'm then setting these variables to certain values. I've said my first name equals, and rather than just type double quote, Cathi, double quote, I'm using an input box which is going to pop up and ask them to enter a first name. And then I'm setting my age to also be an input box that pops up and asks them to enter an age in years. And then those values will be assigned to those variables. And so here I'm bringing up a message box that says hi and whatever they said their first name was. And then brings up a second message box that says, so you are and whatever they said their age is and the text so many years old. Once it's brought up those message boxes, it then goes to A1 and it puts the value, my first name, in A1. The offset command is something that we used earlier in the notes as well. And this offset is telling me I'm not moving any rows, but I am moving one column to the right. And in that cell, I will put the text age, and then I'm moving no rows, but one more column to the right, and I'm entering the value of my age. So let's just test this. If I click in the sub-procedure and press F8, I'll step through it. So here's the first one, my first name. When I go F8, it pops up and says enter your first name. So I'll enter Cathi and click OK. Now if I rest on my first name, it tells me my first name is equal to Cathi. But at the moment my age is equal to 0 because I haven't been asked the question. But as soon as I go F8, the input box pops up and says enter your age in years. So of course I enter 21 and OK. So my age is 21 and my name is Cathi. At this point it's now going to, when I press F8, bring up a message box and say hi and my first name, which is Cathi. So I go F8, hi Cathi. So that's how you can make not only boxes that pop up and ask them for information, but boxes that then turn around and give them information, which is what a message box is doing. It's giving me a message. So I click OK to that, and then I go F8 again. So you are 21 years old. So you are, and whatever the age was, and years old. So I go OK. Then if I go F8, it's going to A1, which I happen to already be there, but it has gone to A1, and it puts in the value, my first name. So it puts Cathi into that cell. Then when I press F8, it goes across one column, and it puts in the value age and a colon. Then it goes across one column and it puts in the value 21. And then F8 one more time to stop stepping through the code. Now there is one problem with this particular sub-procedure, and it's with relation to the input box. If they enter information into an input box that doesn't match the variable data type, it'll cause a problem. So I'll show you what I mean here. If I go through this code again and I go F8, my first name is Cathi, so that's all good, and OK. And then I go F8 and it says what is your age, and I choose to not enter a number. My age is a byte, which is a number between 0 and 255 with no decimal places. It's expecting a number. But if I turn around and go 21, which is actually a string, and go OK, that causes a problem. There's a type mismatch between that being declared as a number and me entering text. And so if I go debug, the user straight away is taken into the code and could cause all sorts of problems. And I don't want the user in the code. So I'm going to hit the blue square, which stops the yellow, resets the yellow, enables me to get out of there. I'm going to go back to my code file, and further down I've got a second copy of the variables sub-procedure. So I'm going to take a copy of this, go back to my Visual Basic Editor, and replace this one by pasting. And I've put this in its place. Now the idea here is that we're using not an input box, but an application input box. So I'm still declaring my first name and I'm still declaring my age as a string and as a byte. But my first name, instead of input box, I've used application input box. And the application input box requires a prompt, and then it requires a type. And the type is the type of data it's expecting. So this is expecting a type 2, and a type 2 is text. This one, my age, is not just an input box, it's an application input box which has a prompt that says enter your age in years, and it's expecting a type 1, which is a number. So let's see, if I run this code, how well this handles me entering 21 in words instead as a number. So I'll just first of all clear this out, delete, go back over here and I'll go F8. And I step through it. My first name is Cathi, so that's all good. And OK. And then F8, and I go 21. Instead of an end and a debug, I now get number is not valid. So this is a much better response from the code saying to the user, hey, this number's not valid, instead of just end and debug, which doesn't help them at all. If I go OK and then enter a number, then I get a better response. And now just press F5 and just run that code. Hi Cathi, OK, you're 21 years old, OK. And it's handled the fact that I put 21 in words much better than end or debug. So an application input box is really quite good, and it's quite common, so if you come across it, that's what it means.